In the year 2347, humanity had spread far beyond Earth, colonizing planets and exploring distant corners of the galaxy. Among the countless ships sent into the void was the *SS Horizon*, a sturdy exploration vessel tasked with mapping uncharted regions of space. Its crew consisted of seasoned professionals who had seen their fair share of strange phenomena. But nothing could have prepared them for what lay ahead. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge, her sharp blue eyes scanning the monitors before her. She was in her late 30s, with short brown hair and a calm demeanor that inspired confidence in her team. The Horizon* had been traveling through an unexplored sector for weeks, and the routine scans had turned up little more than empty space. That changed one quiet evening when the ship's sensors picked up something unusual, a faint, distorted signal drifting through the void. Engineer Daniel Carter, a tall man with glasses perpetually perched on his nose, was the first to notice it. He frowned as he studied the readouts on his console. "Captain," he said, his voice tinged with curiosity, "we're picking up a transmission. It's weak, but it's definitely artificial." Laura turned to him, her expression shifting from calm to alert. "Can you clean it up? Is it a distress call?" Daniel nodded and got to work, adjusting the filters to isolate the signal. After a few moments, fragments of the message became audible. Static crackled between broken. The *SS Horizon* approached Outpost Epsilon 9 cautiously, its engines humming softly as the crew prepared for boarding. Through the ship's viewport, the station looked like a relic of a bygone era, its once pristine metal exterior now battered and scarred by time and neglect. The structure floated eerily in the shadow of the dying star, its surface dimly illuminated by the faint orange glow of the fading sun. It was a place frozen in decay, untouched for decades. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the shuttle deck, her gaze fixed on the looming station. Beside her, Lieutenant Ryan Hughes adjusted his helmet, his usual confidence masking a flicker of unease. Engineer Daniel Carter double-checked the equipment strapped to his belt, while Medic Karen Meyer fidgeted nervously with her scanner. Each of them carried their own doubts, but none voiced them aloud. The mission was clear: investigate the distress signal and determine if anyone, or anything, remained aboard. As the shuttle docked with the station, the airlock hissed open, revealing a dark and foreboding interior. The boarding party stepped inside, their boots clanging against the cold, metallic floor. The air smelled stale, tinged with the faint scent of rust, and something unidentifiable, something organic. Emergency lights blinked sporadically, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant creaks and groans of the aging structure. "This place gives me the creeps," Sam muttered over the comms from the Horizon*. She had stayed behind to monitor the situation, but even through the transmission, her unease was palpable. "You're not wrong," Ryan replied, his voice low. He scanned the area with his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. "Feels like a graveyard." Laura ignored the comments, focusing instead on the task at hand. "Spread out and look for signs of life. Stick together. We don't split up." Her tone left no room for argument. The group moved deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. They passed through what appeared to be living quarters, the rooms filled with overturned furniture and scattered personal belongings. Family photos lay cracked on the floor, their smiling faces faded with time. It was as if the inhabitants had fled in a hurry, abandoning everything without a second thought. In one of the labs, they found evidence of more recent activity. Papers were strewn across desks, some marked with frantic scribbles and diagrams that made little sense. Daniel picked up a crumpled sheet, squinting at the text. "This looks like research data," he said, his brow furrowed. "But it's incomplete. Whatever they were working on, they didn't finish." Karen wandered to the far side of the room, where a small terminal sat half-buried under debris. "Guys, I think this might still work," she called out, brushing dust off the screen. With Daniel's help, she powered it on, and after a few moments of static, fragments of video logs began to play. The recording showed scientists speaking hurriedly, their faces pale and drawn. One man, his eyes wide with fear, warned of strange occurrences, unexplainable noises, equipment malfunctions, and sightings of shadowy figures moving just out of view. Another scientist spoke of nightmares that felt too real, dreams where something whispered to them in voices they couldn't understand. The final log cut off mid-sentence, replaced by a blood-curdling scream. "That's enough," Laura said sharply, turning away from the screen. Her face was unreadable, but her clenched fists betrayed her tension. "We need to keep moving. If there are survivors, we have to find them." As they pressed on, the atmosphere grew heavier, almost suffocating. The temperature dropped noticeably, and their breath formed small clouds in the chilled air. Every step felt like an intrusion, as though the station itself resented their presence. Then, without warning, the lights flickered violently before plunging the group into darkness. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was absolute, save for the sound of their breathing. When the emergency lights sputtered back to life, Ryan was the first to break the tension. "Great, just what we needed." But it wasn't the darkness that unsettled them most. It was the feeling that they were being watched. The flickering emergency lights cast an uneven glow across the corridor, making it hard for the team to shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond their line of sight. The air seemed thicker now, harder to breathe, and every sound, the creak of metal, the hum of failing machinery, felt amplified in the oppressive silence. Laura gripped her flashlight tightly, its beam cutting through the darkness as she led the group forward. Karen stayed close to Daniel, her scanner held up like a shield. "I don't like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It feels wrong." Daniel nodded but didn't respond. He was too busy studying the fragmented logs they had recovered from the terminal. Though incomplete, the recordings painted a chilling picture. Scientists driven mad by inexplicable phenomena, experiments spiraling out of control, and warnings about something awakening beneath the surface of the nearby planet. None of it made sense, but one thing was clear. The station's inhabitants hadn't left willingly. Ryan brought up the rear, his hand resting on the holster of his sidearm. "If we're gonna find survivors, we need to move faster," he said, his tone impatient. "Standing around isn't helping anyone." Laura shot him a sharp look. "We stick to the plan. No rushing, no splitting up." "Got it." Ryan opened his mouth to argue but thought better of it. Instead, he muttered under his breath and adjusted his grip on the flashlight. Despite his bravado, even he couldn't deny the growing sense of unease that clung to them like a second skin. They reached a large chamber, a central hub of sorts, where rows of workstations lined the walls. Monitors hung from the ceiling, their screens cracked or blackened with age. In the center of the room stood a massive console, its surface covered in dust and debris. Karen approached it cautiously, running her fingers over the controls. "This must have been the main operations center," she said. "If there's anything useful here, it'll be on this system." Daniel joined her, pulling tools from his belt to try and restore power. After several tense minutes, the console sputtered to life, emitting a low hum that echoed through the chamber. A holographic display flickered into existence, showing schematics of the station and data streams filled with cryptic symbols. "Can you make sense of this?" Laura asked, leaning over Daniel's shoulder. "Give me a minute," he replied, his eyes scanning the information. "Some of it's encrypted, but I think I can. Wait." He froze, his face pale. "Captain, look at this." On the screen was a series of images, grainy footage taken from security cameras scattered throughout the station. At first glance, they appeared normal. Scientists working, equipment being tested, everyday activities. But then came the anomalies. Shadows moved where none should exist. Figures darted across hallways, only to vanish when the camera angle shifted. And in one particularly disturbing clip, a scientist screamed as tendrils of black smoke coiled around him, pulling him out of frame. "What the hell is that?" Ryan demanded, stepping closer. I don't know, Daniel admitted, his voice shaky. But whatever it is, it's not natural. Before anyone could respond, the lights dimmed again, plunging the room into near darkness. This time, the emergency backups failed to kick in. The only illumination came from their flashlights, casting narrow beams that barely penetrated the gloom. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble echoed through the station, followed by the sound of metal scraping against metal. Laura raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Did you hear that?" Everyone froze, straining to listen. The noise grew louder, more distinct, a rhythmic tapping, like footsteps, drawing closer. Karen instinctively stepped back, bumping into Daniel. "Is someone else here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Laura said, her own voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. She turned to Ryan. "Check the corridor. Stay within sight." Ryan hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. He moved toward the doorway, his flashlight sweeping the shadows. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from the corner of his light, something shifted, a blur of movement too fast to identify. He swung the beam toward it, but the corridor was empty. "Ryan," Laura called sharply, "get back here." As he turned to rejoin the group, the tapping stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. No one spoke. They all felt it, the presence of something unseen, watching, waiting. Whatever had driven the scientists to madness was still here, and it knew they had arrived. The silence in the corridor was deafening, broken only by the sound of Ryan's hurried footsteps as he rejoined the group. His face was pale, though he tried to mask his unease with a scowl. "Nothing out there," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "Must have been my imagination." But no one believed him. The tension in the room was palpable, pressing down on them like a weight. Laura kept her flashlight trained on the doorway, her grip tightening around it. "We need to keep moving," she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. "Whatever's here, we can't let it corner us." Daniel nodded, already gathering the tools he had spread across the console. "I've got enough data to work with for now. If we can get back to the shuttle, I might be able to piece together what happened here." Karen hesitated, her eyes darting nervously toward the shadows beyond the light. Do you think whatever did this is still alive?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable, as they prepared to leave the chamber. Laura took the lead again, her flashlight cutting through the darkness as they moved cautiously back into the corridor. The station seemed different now, more hostile, as if it had shifted while they weren't looking. The walls, once merely worn and rusted, now appeared warped, their surfaces rippling faintly under the dim light. The air felt colder, biting at their skin even through their suits. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the station itself was amplifying their presence. They hadn't gone far when Karen stopped suddenly, her breath catching in her throat. "Wait," she whispered, pointing her flashlight down a side passage. At first, all they saw was an empty hallway, but then something caught the edge of the beam, a shape, hunched and unmoving, partially hidden behind a pile of debris. Laura signaled for silence and stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached, the shape came into focus. It was a body, or what remained of one. Skeletal remains fused with jagged shards of metal lay sprawled against the wall, its bones twisted unnaturally. Wires and cables snaked out from the ribcage, connecting the corpse to the station itself like some grotesque experiment gone wrong. "What is that?" Karen stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Daniel replied, his face pale. He knelt beside the remains, examining them carefully. "It looks like the station absorbed it, like it became part of the structure." Ryan stepped back, disgust and unease written across his face. "This place is cursed," he muttered. "We should have never come here." Laura ignored him, her mind racing. If the station could do this to a person, to turn flesh and bone into something unrecognizable, Then whatever force was behind it was far beyond anything they had encountered before. And if it could happen to one person, it could happen to them. Before she could speak, a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. The lights flickered again, casting the corridor in erratic bursts of brightness and shadow. Then came the whispers, soft, indistinct voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. They were faint at first, almost drowned out by the hum, but they grew louder, more insistent. Karen clutched her scanner tightly, her hands trembling. "Do you hear that? What is that?" "It's messing with us," Ryan snapped, though his voice betrayed a hint of fear. "It's trying to scare us." "Maybe," Laura said slowly, her eyes scanning the darkness. "Or maybe it's communicating." The whispers coalesced into something resembling words, though they were distorted and layered, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. Fragments reached them, phrases like, "You shouldn't have come," and "join us," before dissolving back into static-like murmurs. The effect was maddening, making it hard to focus. "We need to leave now," Daniel said urgently, already backing toward the way they had come. Laura nodded, her instincts screaming at her to get her team out of there. But as they turned to leave, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. The walls began to shift again, the metal rippling like liquid. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting into forms that defied logic. Something was coming. For them. The corridor seemed to twist and warp around them, the walls pulsing like living flesh. Laura's flashlight beam danced erratically over the shifting surfaces, revealing glimpses of shapes that shouldn't exist, twisted forms that flickered in and out of reality. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, wrapping around their minds like a suffocating fog. Each word felt invasive, as if it were burrowing into their thoughts. "We can't stay here," Karen shouted, her voice cracking with panic. She clutched her scanner so tightly her knuckles turned white. It's alive." Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. "Keep moving. Don't look at it directly." His voice was strained but commanding, cutting through the chaos. He knew instinctively that focusing on the entity would only make it stronger. Ryan brought up the rear, his flashlight sweeping wildly behind them. "What is this thing?" he demanded, his bravado crumbling under the weight of sheer terror. Shadows darted at the edges of his light, retreating when he swung the beam toward them. It was as though the darkness itself was alive, hunting them. Laura pushed forward, her mind racing. Every step felt heavier, as if the station was resisting their escape. Her chest tightened with each labored breath, but she forced herself to keep going. "Stay together," she barked, her voice cutting through the cacophony of whispers. "If we split up, we're dead." The group stumbled into a larger chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows. The hum had become deafening now, vibrating through their bones. In the center of the room stood what appeared to be some kind of machine, a massive, jagged structure covered in glowing runes that pulsed faintly. It looked ancient, otherworldly, and horribly out of place in the derelict station. "What is that?" Karen whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Daniel replied, his voice trembling. "But I think it's the source. Whatever's doing this, it's tied to that thing." Before anyone could react, Ryan stepped toward the machine, his expression unreadable. "Maybe we can shut it down," he said, raising his weapon. "If we destroy it, maybe we stop all this." "No," Laura snapped, lunging to grab him. "We don't know what will happen if you tamper with it." But Ryan wasn't listening. His face was pale, his movements jerky, as if he were no longer fully in control. He raised his weapon and fired at the machine. The blast struck the surface, sending sparks flying. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the runes flared violently, bathing the room in blinding light. The whispers erupted into a deafening roar, and the shadows surged forward, coalescing into a single, monstrous shape. It loomed over them, impossibly tall, its form constantly shifting between humanoid and something far more alien. Eyes that glowed like embers burned into theirs, and a mouth full of jagged teeth stretched wide in a silent scream. Karen screamed, stumbling backward. "It's here. It's really here." "Fall back," Laura shouted, grabbing Karen's arm and dragging her toward the exit. Daniel followed closely, his tools forgotten in the rush. Only Ryan remained, frozen in place as the entity towered over him. "Ryan," Laura called desperately. "Move." But Ryan didn't respond. Instead, he tilted his head, staring up at the creature with an expression of eerie calm. "I understand now," he murmured, his voice hollow. "It's not evil. It just wants us to see." "Ryan, snap out of it," Laura yelled, reaching for him. But before she could pull him away, tendrils of shadow shot out from the entity, wrapping around him. He didn't resist, didn't even flinch, as they dragged him closer. "Leave him," Daniel shouted, grabbing Laura's arm. "We can't help him." Tears streamed down Karen's face as she watched Ryan vanish into the writhing mass of darkness. The entity let out another ear-splitting roar, shaking the entire chamber. The walls buckled and cracked, debris raining down around them. "Go. Now," Laura ordered, shoving Karen and Daniel ahead of her. They ran as fast as they could, the station collapsing around them. Behind them, the entity's roar faded into an almost mocking whisper. "Asterisk, you cannot escape, asterisk." As they reached the airlock leading to the shuttle, Laura risked one last glance back. The corridor was empty, but she could still feel the presence watching them. Whatever they had awakened wasn't done with them yet. The shuttle bay was their only hope, but reaching it felt like running through a nightmare. The station groaned and shuddered around them, its metal walls buckling under some unseen force. Sparks rained down from exposed wires, and the air grew thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning circuits. Laura led the way, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly as she pushed forward, her mind racing to keep ahead of the panic threatening to overwhelm her. Karen stumbled, her legs trembling beneath her, but Daniel caught her before she fell. "Keep going," he urged, his voice hoarse. His glasses were askew, and sweat dripped from his brow, but he refused to slow down. They couldn't afford to stop. Not now, not ever. Behind them, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was a chorus, overlapping and discordant, filling the air with words they couldn't fully understand. Fragments reached them. "Asterisk, join us. Asterisk, asterisk, you belong. Asterisk, asterisk, there is no escape. Asterisk," each syllable clawed at their minds, making it harder to think clearly. Ryan's absence weighed heavily on all of them, though none dared speak of it. Laura clenched her jaw, forcing herself to focus on survival. She had made the decision to leave him behind, and while she knew it was the only choice, the guilt gnawed at her nonetheless. There would be time for regret later, if they survived. When they finally reached the shuttle bay, relief surged through them, but it was short-lived. The massive doors leading to the docking area were sealed shut, their controls dead. Daniel immediately knelt by the panel, pulling out tools to bypass the system. "Give me a minute," he muttered, his hands shaking but determined. "I can get this open." Laura stood guard, her flashlight sweeping the room. Shadows danced along the edges of the light, too fluid to be natural. She could feel the entity watching them, waiting. "Hurry, Daniel," she said, her voice tight. "We don't have much time." Karen leaned against the wall, clutching her scanner like a lifeline. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. "It's still here," she whispered, her eyes darting around the room. "It's inside my head." "Focus, Karen," Laura snapped, though there was no real anger in her tone. "We're getting out of this." A loud crash echoed through the station, followed by the sound of tearing metal. The entity was coming for them, and it wasn't going to let them leave without a fight. Laura turned toward the noise, raising her weapon, though she doubted it would do any good against something so unnatural. Finally, Daniel let out a triumphant shout. "Got it." The doors hissed open, revealing the small shuttle waiting beyond. They sprinted inside, slamming the hatch closed behind them. Laura hit the release button, and the shuttle detached from the station with a jolt, rocketing away into the void. For a moment, silence filled the cabin. The hum of the engines was almost soothing compared to the chaos they had left behind. But the relief was fleeting. As they watched through the viewport, Outpost Epsilon 9 began to collapse in on itself, consumed by the entity's power. Twisted metal tore apart, and bursts of energy erupted from its core, lighting up the darkness like a dying star. Then, without warning, something shot out from the wreckage. A tendril of shadow, impossibly long, reaching toward the shuttle. It struck the hull with a deafening clang, sending vibrations through the tiny craft. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed as systems overloaded. "What is that?" Karen screamed, clutching her seat. "It's on the ship," Daniel shouted, frantically checking the readings. It's inside." Laura gripped the controls, her knuckles white. "Hold on," she yelled, pushing the shuttle to its limits. They sped toward the *SS Horizon *, the shadowy tendril trailing behind them like a predator unwilling to let its prey escape. As they approached the mothership, Laura activated the comms. "Sam, we've got trouble. Prepare for emergency docking. And lock down the ship. Whatever's after us, it's not staying behind." Static crackled over the line before Sam's voice came through, tense but steady. "Understood. Docking bay ready. Just get here in one piece." The shuttle lurched violently as the tendril struck again, this time harder. Warning lights blinked furiously, and smoke began to fill the cabin. Laura gritted her teeth, refusing to give in to despair. They were so close. With a final burst of speed, the shuttle connected with the Horizon *. The airlock sealed shut just as the tendril recoiled, vanishing back into the void. For a moment, everything was still. But deep within the ship, something stirred. The shuttle docked with a hollow thud, and the crew stumbled out into the safety of the *SS Horizon *. Laura was the first to step onto the deck, her chest heaving, as she tried to steady her breathing. Behind her, Daniel and Karen moved quickly, their faces pale and drawn. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. The weight of what they had just escaped hung heavy in the air. Sam greeted them at the airlock, her blonde ponytail slightly disheveled from rushing to secure the ship. "What happened out there?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Laura replied, her tone grim. She glanced back at the shuttle bay doors, half expecting something to burst through at any moment. "It followed us. Whatever it is, it's not done with us yet." Daniel nodded, his glasses fogged from the sudden change in temperature. "We need to quarantine this area, if even a fragment of it got aboard." "It did," Karen interrupted, her voice trembling. She clutched her scanner tightly, her knuckles white. "I can feel it. It's already here." Laura turned to Sam. "Lock down the docking bay. Seal it off completely. No one goes near it until we figure out what we're dealing with." Sam hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Understood. I'll get it done." She hurried away, her boots echoing down the corridor. As the others moved toward the bridge, the tension on the ship became palpable. Crew members who had been going about their duties now stopped, sensing that something was wrong. Hushed whispers spread like wildfire, and fear began to take root. The Horizon had always felt like a safe haven, but now it seemed tainted, invaded by something beyond comprehension. On the bridge, Laura took her seat, her mind racing. She tapped commands into the console, pulling up surveillance footage of the shuttle bay. At first, everything appeared normal. The shuttle sat quietly in its berth, the airlock sealed tight. But then, something flickered in the corner of the screen. A shadow, darker than the rest, shifted unnaturally against the wall. It wasn't moving with the ship, it was moving on its own. "Did you see that?" Karen whispered, pointing at the monitor. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with terror. "I saw it," Laura confirmed, her jaw tightening. She opened a ship-wide channel. "Attention, crew. This is Captain Bennett. We are implementing an immediate lockdown of Deck 4. Do not approach the shuttle bay under any circumstances. Repeat, stay clear of Deck 4. Her announcement was met with stunned silence, followed by a flurry of questions over the comms. Laura ignored them, focusing instead on damage control. They needed answers, and fast. Daniel worked furiously at another console, analyzing the data he had salvaged from the station. "There's something in the logs," he said, his voice strained. "A reference to contamination. The scientists called it the Veil. It's not just a creature. It's more like a force, or an infection. Once it gets inside your mind, it doesn't let go." Karen shuddered visibly. "That's what it feels like it's crawling under my skin." Ryan's betrayal, or possession, or whatever it had been, flashed in Laura's mind. She clenched her fists, pushing aside the guilt and focusing on the task at hand. "We need to find a way to contain it before it spreads. If it infects the entire crew, it will destroy us," Daniel finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "And maybe the galaxy." Suddenly, the lights dimmed across the ship, plunging the bridge into semi-darkness. Emergency panels flickered on, casting an eerie red glow over the room. Alarms blared, warning of system malfunctions throughout the vessel. On the monitors, shadows danced along the corridors, too fluid to be natural. "It's here," Karen murmured, tears streaming down her face. "It's everywhere." Laura stood, her expression resolute despite the fear clawing at her insides. "We fight. Whatever this thing is, we don't give it an inch." But deep down, she wondered if they were already too late. The shuttle docked with a hollow thud, and the crew stumbled out into the safety of the *SS Horizon*. Laura was the first to step onto the deck, her chest heaving as she tried to steady her breathing. Behind her, Daniel and Karen moved quickly, their faces pale and drawn. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. The weight of what they had just escaped hung heavy in the air. Sam greeted them at the airlock, her blonde ponytail slightly disheveled from rushing to secure the ship. "What happened out there?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Laura replied, her tone grim. She glanced back at the shuttle bay doors, half expecting something to burst through at any moment. "It followed us. Whatever it is, it's not done with us yet." Daniel nodded, his glasses fogged from the sudden change in temperature. "We need to quarantine this area, if even a fragment of it got aboard." "It did," Karen interrupted, her voice trembling. She clutched her scanner tightly, her knuckles white. "I can feel it. It's already here." Laura turned to Sam. "Lock down the docking bay. Seal it off completely. No one goes near it until we figure out what we're dealing with." Sam hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Understood. I'll get it done." She hurried away, her boots echoing down the corridor. As the others moved toward the bridge, the tension on the ship became palpable. Crew members who had been going about their duties now stopped, sensing that something was wrong. Hushed whispers spread like wildfire, and fear began to take root. The *Horizon* had always felt like a safe haven, but now it seemed tainted, invaded by something beyond comprehension. On the bridge, Laura took her seat, her mind racing. She tapped commands into the console, pulling up surveillance footage of the shuttle bay. At first, everything appeared normal. The shuttle sat quietly in its berth, the airlock sealed tight. But then, something flickered in the corner of the screen. A shadow, darker than the rest, shifted unnaturally against the wall. It wasn't moving with the ship, it was moving on its own. "Did you see that?" Karen whispered, pointing at the monitor. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with terror. "I saw it," Laura confirmed, her jaw tightening. She opened a ship-wide channel. "Attention, Crew, this is Captain Bennett. We are implementing an immediate lockdown of Deck 4. Do not approach the shuttle bay under any circumstances. Repeat, stay clear of Deck 4. Her announcement was met with stunned silence, followed by a flurry of questions over the comms. Laura ignored them, focusing instead on damage control. They needed answers, and fast. Daniel worked furiously at another console, analyzing the data he had salvaged from the station. "There's something in the logs," he said, his voice strained. A reference to contamination. The scientists called it the veil. It's not just a creature. It's more like a force, or an infection. Once it gets inside your mind, it doesn't let go. Karen shuddered visibly. That's what it feels like it's crawling under my skin. Ryan's betrayal, or possession, or whatever it had been, flashed in Laura's mind. She clenched her fists, pushing aside the guilt and focusing on the task at hand. We need to find a way to contain it before it spreads. If it infects the entire crew, it will destroy us, Daniel finished, his voice barely above a whisper. And maybe the galaxy. Suddenly, the lights dimmed across the ship, plunging the bridge into semi-darkness. Emergency panels flickered on, casting an eerie red glow over the room. Alarms blared, warning of system malfunctions throughout the vessel. On the monitors, shadows danced along the corridors, too fluid to be natural. "It's here," Karen murmured, tears streaming down her face. "It's everywhere." Laura stood, her expression resolute despite the fear clawing at her insides. "We fight. Whatever this thing is, we don't give it an inch." But deep down, she wondered if they were already too late. Karen sat alone in the medical bay, her hands trembling as she stared at the scanner on the table before her. The device had been useless since they returned from the station. It couldn't detect anything physical, but that didn't stop her from trying. She felt it inside her, a cold presence spreading through her mind like frost on glass. It whispered to her constantly, fragments of thoughts and images she couldn't make sense of. Sometimes it sounded like Ryan's voice. "Karen." Laura's voice broke through the haze, pulling her back to reality. The captain stood in the doorway, her face lined with exhaustion. "How are you holding up?" Karen shook her head, unable to meet Laura's gaze. "I don't know. I can't tell what's me anymore, and what's it." Laura stepped closer, placing a hand on Karen's shoulder. "You're stronger than this thing. Don't let it win." Karen wanted to believe her, but the doubt was overwhelming. The whispers grew louder when she closed her eyes, painting vivid pictures of places she'd never seen. Dark worlds bathed in shadow, vast voids filled with endless screams. And always, there was a presence watching her, waiting for her to give in. On the bridge, Daniel worked tirelessly, his fingers flying over the console as he sifted through the data recovered from the station. He had pieced together more about the entity they called the Veil. It wasn't just alive, it was intelligent, ancient, and hungry. It fed on fear, despair, and chaos, growing stronger with every moment it lingered among them. "We have to cut it off," Daniel muttered to himself, scrolling through lines of corrupted code. "If we can isolate its connection to the ship." Sam approached him, her expression grim. "What if we can't? What if it's already too late?" "It's not," Daniel said firmly, though his voice wavered. "We still have a chance." Meanwhile, strange occurrences spread throughout the Asterisk Horizon Asterisk. Crew members reported seeing shadowy figures moving in the corners of their vision. Machinery malfunctioned without explanation, and eerie whispers echoed through the corridors even when no one was around. Panic began to take hold, and discipline started to break down. Some crew members refused to leave their quarters, while others wandered aimlessly, muttering to themselves as if caught in private conversations with unseen entities. Laura addressed the crew again, her voice calm but firm. "Stay focused. We're working on a solution, but until then, stick to your posts. If you see anything unusual, report it immediately. Do not engage." Despite her words, the situation worsened. In engineering, Technicians discovered blackened patches spreading across the walls, resembling veins of oil pulsing faintly with light. When touched, the substance burned like acid, leaving behind charred marks. No one knew how far it had spread or where it would appear next. That night, Karen dreamed. Or perhaps it wasn't a dream. She found herself standing in a featureless void, surrounded by darkness so complete it seemed to swallow all sound. A figure emerged, shapeless and shifting, its form constantly changing between human and something alien. Its voice resonated in her mind, deep and resonant, speaking directly to her soul. "You do not need to fight," it said. "You are part of us now." "No," Karen shouted, backing away. "Leave me alone." The entity laughed, a sound both beautiful and horrifying. "You cannot escape. You will understand soon." She woke with a start, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. Across the room, the lights dimmed briefly, and a shadow darted past the doorway. She froze, clutching the blanket tightly. The next morning, she told Laura everything. "It's learning," Karen said, her voice hollow. "It knows our fears, our weaknesses. It's using them against us." Laura listened intently, her face unreadable. "Then we'll use its tactics against it. If it feeds on fear, we'll starve it." Together, they devised a plan. Using the ship's core energy, they would create a containment field strong enough to trap the entity, or at least weaken it. It was risky, requiring them to venture into the most infected areas of the ship, but they had no other choice. As Laura prepared the team, Karen steeled herself for what lay ahead. The entity was inside her, whispering promises of power and freedom, but she refused to listen. This time, she wouldn't run. She would fight. The plan was simple in theory, but perilous in execution. Laura, Daniel, and Karen would descend into the heart of the ship, where the entity's influence was strongest, to activate a containment field powered by the Horizon Asterisk's core. It was the only way to stop the veil from spreading further, or so they hoped. Armed with improvised tools and shaky resolve, the trio prepared for what might be their final mission. As they made their way through the corridors, the ship felt like a living thing, twisting and shifting around them. The walls were covered in thick, black tendrils that pulsed faintly, as if feeding on the vessel's energy. Lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently of their owners. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the ship itself was amplifying their presence. "This is insane," Daniel muttered, clutching a diagnostic tool like a weapon. "We're walking straight into its territory." "We don't have a choice," Laura replied, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her insides. She held her flashlight steady, its beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. "If we don't do this, none of us are making it out alive." Karen walked silently between them, her face pale and drawn. She hadn't spoken much since sharing her nightmare, but her eyes darted nervously around the corridor, searching for signs of movement. The whispers followed her everywhere, growing louder with each step. They weren't just in her head anymore. They seeped into the air, overlapping voices that spoke in fragmented sentences. "You can't win, they hissed. "You belong to us, "Karen," Laura said gently, noticing her distress. "Stay with us. Focus on the mission." Karen nodded weakly, gripping her scanner tighter. "I'm trying." They reached the engine room, the heart of the ship, where the tendrils of the veil had spread most aggressively. The once pristine chamber was now a nightmarish labyrinth of writhing shadows and distorted metal. Consoles sparked uncontrollably, and the hum of the core was drowned out by an otherworldly growl. In the center of the room loomed a massive cocoon-like structure, pulsating with dark energy. It was the source, the entity's anchor to the ship. "There," Daniel said, pointing to a control panel near the core. "If we reroute power from there, we can generate the containment field." "But how do we get close enough?" Laura asked, scanning the area. The tendrils lashed out unpredictably, striking anyone who ventured too near. "I'll draw its attention," Karen said suddenly, surprising even herself. Her voice trembled, but her expression hardened with determination. "It's already inside me. Maybe I can confuse it, give you time to finish." "No," Laura snapped, shaking her head. "We stick together. That's the rule." "It's the only way," Karen insisted, stepping forward. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't back down. "Trust me." Before Laura could argue, Karen moved toward the cocoon, her movements slow and deliberate. As she approached, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar, and the tendril surged toward her, wrapping around her arms and legs. She cried out in pain but didn't resist, letting the entity pull her closer. "Now," she screamed, her voice breaking. Laura and Daniel sprang into action, dodging the flailing tendrils as they raced to the control panel. Daniel worked frantically, bypassing damaged circuits and rerouting power, while Laura kept watch, fending off attacks with whatever makeshift weapons they had brought. The air crackled with energy, and the floor shook violently beneath their feet. "You've got 30 seconds," Daniel shouted, sweat dripping from his brow. "Get clear." Laura hesitated, glancing back at Karen. The medic was barely visible now, engulfed by the writhing mass of shadows. Her screams had faded into sobs, but her sacrifice had bought them the time they needed. "Karen," Laura whispered, her chest tightening with guilt. "Go," Karen yelled one last time, her voice filled with both anguish and resolve. "Do it." With a heavy heart, Laura turned and ran, joining Daniel at the controls. Together, they activated the containment field. A blinding surge of light erupted from the core, washing over the room and burning away the tendrils. For a moment, everything was silent. But deep within the cocoon, something stirred. The containment field hummed with energy, its bright light casting harsh shadows across the engine room. The tendrils of the veil recoiled, retreating into the cocoon-like structure at the center of the chamber. For a moment, it seemed like the plan had worked. The entity was trapped, held at bay by the ship's core energy. But as Laura and Daniel caught their breath, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. "Karen," Laura whispered, her voice cracking as she stared at the cocoon. The medic's sacrifice weighed heavily on her, a reminder of the cost of their survival. There was no sign of Karen now, only the faint outline of her silhouette within the pulsating mass of shadow and light. "We need to seal this room," Daniel said, his tone urgent. "If even a fragment of it escapes." Laura nodded, forcing herself to focus. "Let's move." They activated the emergency bulkheads, sealing off the engine room from the rest of the ship. The process was slow, each hydraulic hiss echoing like a countdown to disaster. As the final door locked into place, the lights dimmed briefly before stabilizing, signaling that the containment field was holding, for now. Back on the bridge, Sam greeted them with a mix of relief and dread. "Did it work?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is it gone?" "It's contained," Laura replied, though her expression betrayed her uncertainty. "But we're not out of danger yet." The crew of the *SS Horizon* moved through the ship in silence, their faces pale and drawn. The veil's influence lingered in the air, a constant reminder of what they had faced. Crew members avoided eye contact, too shaken to speak. Some refused to leave their quarters, while others worked feverishly to repair the damage done to the vessel. The sense of camaraderie that had once defined the mission was replaced by paranoia and fear. Days passed, but the tension never eased. The containment field held, but strange occurrences continued throughout the ship. Lights flickered without explanation, and whispers echoed faintly in empty corridors. No one dared approach the sealed engine room, where the cocoon pulsed faintly behind the thick metal doors. Daniel pored over the data recovered from the station, searching for answers. He found references to similar incidents, other ships and stations that had encountered the veil, only to vanish without a trace. Each account ended the same way. The entity adapted, growing stronger with every attempt to contain it. "We can't stay here," he told Laura one evening, his face pale from exhaustion. It's only a matter of time before it breaks free. Laura knew he was right. The Horizon was damaged, its systems barely functioning, but staying in the dying star system was suicide. Reluctantly, she gave the order to prepare for departure, setting a course for the nearest inhabited planet. They would quarantine the ship upon arrival, leaving the fate of the Veil and the secrets of Outpost Epsilon 9 in the hands of others. As the Horizon drifted away from the wreckage of the station, Laura stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. She couldn't shake the image of Karen, consumed by the entity's darkness. Somewhere deep within the ship, the cocoon pulsed faintly, a ticking clock counting down to something far worse. For now, they had survived. But Laura knew the truth. The Veil wasn't gone. It was waiting, biding its time. And someday, somewhere, another distress signal would be sent, drawing unsuspecting souls into its grasp. The galaxy would never forget what had happened aboard the SS Horizon *, but forgetting wouldn't save them.